How hard is it for a 35-year-old man with no savings and no career to meet his girlfriend's parents? He faces a soft rejection right from the start. Furthermore, Donghwa only drives a second-hand car. While answering his prospective father-in-law's questions, Donghwa is so embarrassed that his toes curl. Donghwa feels extremely awkward, not knowing where to put his hands and feet. It wasn't until hearing that Donghwa's father is a famous lawyer that the father-in-law suddenly becomes very enthusiastic, immediately offering him good cigarettes and inviting him outside for a smoke. After dating for 3 years, Sunhee had never brought Donghwa home because she worried about her parents' attitude. This time, she finally gathered the courage to bring him back. Her father actually seems to like Donghwa, allowing Sunhee to breathe a sigh of relief. Her sister advises her to relax and not worry. Interacting with his father-in-law for the first time, Donghwa feels somewhat awkward. He braces himself and tries to make small talk, hoping to leave a good impression. The father-in-law is also very polite, praising Donghwa's beautiful beard for fitting the temperament of a poet, and complimenting how good he looks in glasses. Somehow, the two start talking about Sunhee's mother. The father-in-law says she was a very talented and wise woman who loved writing poetry and acting, but gave up performing after meeting him. He even mocks himself for being a show-off. The atmosphere today is quite good, and Donghwa tries even harder to please. Hearing that his father-in-law bought this entire mountain specifically for his mother, transforming it from a barren wasteland into its current state over many years, Donghwa repeatedly praises him. He remarks that it is rare to see such filial piety nowadays and even bows deeply. These words touch the father-in-law's heart, and the two start drinking together. After a few glasses of wine, they get along swimmingly. The father-in-law strongly urges Donghwa to stay and watch the sunset, promising to cook personally to properly entertain his future son-in-law. Tipsy and warm, Donghwa takes the opportunity to ask his father-in-law why familial love can be so profound, so deep that it can change the landscape of a mountain. The father-in-law is visibly moved, stating that besides his mother, no one else had ever made him experience such deep and pure love. Donghwa quickly expresses his understanding, saying he knows exactly how much the father-in-law loves Sunhee. He mentions that Sunhee often talks about him, and seeing him today made Donghwa realize the kind of love she receives from him. However, this second-hand vintage car has too many problems. He constantly explains the precautions to Sunhee, which makes her sister a bit impatient. Arriving at the restaurant after a bumpy ride, the sister asks Donghwa why he doesn't drive a better car. Donghwa ponders for a moment and replies that he thinks the car is beautiful, and he genuinely doesn't have much money. He looks reluctant and clearly dislikes the topic, but forces himself to explain that he doesn't want to accept help from his family since he has already moved out. Sunhee firmly supports him from the side, stating that Donghwa has long been independent and makes his own living. Ignoring Donghwa's expression, the sister continues to ask what he does for a living and how he makes money. Donghwa forces a smile and says he works part-time at a wedding banquet hall on weekends, shooting wedding videos. Going in circles, the conversation returns to this topic, and the smile disappears from Donghwa's face. The sister then asks him what he finds beautiful about Sunhee. This excites Donghwa, who says Sunhee is like an angel, and after 3 years together, he loves her more and more. Sunhee smiles happily and says she feels the same. However, the sister didn't ask this question to watch the couple show off their affection. Her real goal is to lead into the next topic. The sister tells Donghwa a story. Sunhee has always been beautiful and assertive since childhood. During college, a talented young man became obsessed with her after watching just one of her performances. He ran to their door in the middle of the night, ringing the bell frantically just to see her. But she didn't even show her face and simply had their father chase the man away. On the surface, these words seem to praise her sister for not being a gold digger, but in reality, the sister is using this story of a talented pursuer to issue a warning to Donghwa. Sunhee might not care about money, but when it comes to marriage, a lack of money is absolutely unacceptable. If he can't provide, there are plenty of others waiting to pursue her. She implies he shouldn't forget about his powerful father and should learn to rely on his family's wealth. Donghwa understands this perfectly well. He can comprehend the sister's intentions, knowing she is just looking out for Sunhee's future, but he truly doesn't want to bring up his own family. Seeing that he doesn't look well, Sunhee quickly changes the subject. After the meal, Donghwa stands alone by the river, lost in thought. He takes the coffee Sunhee hands him and takes a sip, mentioning that he still hurts. Sunhee knows Donghwa means her sister is too calculating and always thinking about money. She explains that her sister has been smart since childhood, and their family placed high expectations on her. But her mental state hasn't been quite right lately, hoping she will get better after resting for a while. While touring the mountain, Donghwa remarks that a small pagoda is very beautiful. The sister points out that the pagoda further up is bigger and prettier. Donghwa doesn't argue with her, simply stating that he still finds the smaller one more beautiful. Despite her mocking remarks, Donghwa pays no mind and stands alone by the pagoda, admiring the distant scenery. Seeing him like this, the sister complains to Sunhee, saying he looks like a poet and acts like a Taoist priest, completely detached from the mundane world. Sunhee doesn't want her sister to be prejudiced against Donghwa, expressing her admiration for him. She thinks it's remarkable that he lives without relying on his parents, and asserts that he has always been living earnestly and working hard. The sister remains skeptical and relentlessly questions whether Donghwa truly hasn't asked his family for a single penny. Sunhee says so much just to get her sister to accept her boyfriend, but the sister argues that Donghwa's behavior is just vanity. He refuses to ask his family for money, but also fails to find a proper job. She believes he could easily treat poetry as a hobby like their mother did, writing in his spare time. Furthermore, with a powerful father backing him, he could definitely find a good job instead of just drifting along as he is now, unable to even afford a new car and driving a second-hand one. Her sister's words somewhat affect Sunhee. Seeing the green trees sprouting new buds, Donghwa is struck by poetic inspiration and laments how small and ignorant humanity is. Unlike before, Sunhee doesn't simply agree with him. She can't help but retort that in order to survive, one still needs to know something. Donghwa just smiles it off and continues his grandiose speech, saying that humans know nothing and can stop nothing, so they can only try to feel more. This makes Sunhee a bit impatient. After finishing her prayers to Buddha, the sister comes out and gives Donghwa a small gift, temporarily easing the tense atmosphere. However, upon seeing several nameless pagodas, Donghwa begins to philosophize again, talking extensively about his feelings on death. He claims that the existence of death makes life less heavy and makes living much richer and fuller. Fortunately, the father-in-law calls right on time to summon them home for dinner. Otherwise, the conversation would have turned awkward once again. Initially, the atmosphere at the dinner table is harmonious. Sunhee's parents entertain Donghwa warmly, treating him as if he is already their son-in-law. Donghwa also tries hard to perform well, praising his mother-in-law's cooking and speaking highly of her poetry. This flatters the mother-in-law so much that she continuously exchanges thoughts on writing poetry with him and insists he visit often in the future. The father-in-law brings out fine wine he usually saves, constantly clinking glasses with him. In their excitement, they even skip eating and take him behind the mountain to watch the sunset. Although they get along well, the topic inevitably shifts back to financial conditions. Donghwa faces the most agonizing dinner of his life. The mother-in-law gets straight to the point, suggesting it's safer to buy a good car. Donghwa nods in agreement and honestly admits he currently doesn't have much money. Knowing full well that he hates asking his father for money, the sister still asks him if he has a father he could ask. Donghwa shows a hint of displeasure but glances at Sunhee and forces a smile, explaining that life doesn't require that many things. He wants to try living a simple life, where having just enough money is fine, allowing him to live the way he truly wants. The mother-in-law emphasizes again that it's better to be well off. People work so hard specifically to earn more money for a better life and shouldn't needlessly suffer. By this time, Donghwa has drank too much and is struggling to control his emotions. Right then, the sister inexplicably blurts out again that he still has his father backing him. She speaks so quickly that the father-in-law can't even stop her. Seeing the atmosphere turn sour, the mother-in-law hastily changes the subject by complimenting Donghwa's handsome looks and asking him to share a poem he recently wrote. Emboldened by alcohol, Donghwa lets loose, clears his throat and begins to recite a poem. From everyone's expressions, it isn't hard to tell that they don't think much of the poem, but pleasantries still have to be spoken. The father-in-law casually offers a couple of compliments. Unexpectedly, the sister immediately retorts, saying the poem is too short. Donghwa already harbored resentment toward the sister, but had been holding it in. Hearing her dismiss his poetry finally makes him erupt completely. He scolds the sister for constantly dictating his life, despite understanding absolutely nothing. The dinner ultimately ends in extreme awkwardness. Sunhee supports the dead drunk Donghwa to rest, while her parents head up to the cabin on the mountaintop, drinking and discussing their daughter's future. With no outsiders present, the two completely open up. The father-in-law feels that being a poet doesn't count as a real profession. He notes that Donghwa is already in his mid-30s, yet still has no idea how he will support himself in the future. Moreover, his ideas are too extreme, completely trapping him within his own obsessions. The sad part is that those thoughts might not even be original. The mother-in-law, who is also a poet, feels that Donghwa lacks the talent for poetry as well as the grit of life, and will never become a true poet. However, she believes Donghwa simply hasn't hit a wall yet, and is at an age where he still hasn't realized his dreams are unattainable. Perhaps as he grows a bit older and experiences more, he will improve. Hearing this, the father-in-law shakes his head vigorously, arguing that Donghwa is already 35, and his life is already set. He is merely using the title of a poet to escape reality. He has no plans for his life and only lives as he pleases. Furthermore, men who pretend to be quiet and deep are highly likely to be true playboys because they easily deceive women. Naturally, they inevitably bring up Donghwa's prominent father, sighing over how such an outstanding lawyer could raise a son like this. Perhaps considering that his father serves as a safety net, or out of trust in their daughter, they decide not to forcibly break the couple apart for now. They believe their daughter Sunhee is smart enough to make the right judgment. They consider this a learning experience for her, an accumulation of life experience, as long as she doesn't get hurt too deeply. Even though they only met once, they passed a decisive judgment on Donghua. Unaware that he has already been labeled as inadequate, Donghua remembers Sunhee saying that the moon in the mountains is beautiful. So after waking up, he gropes his way up the mountain alone, lies down on a chair, and quietly admires the view. Passing by a flower bed, he stops, bends down, and uses a light to observe closely. It is just like the poem by Bai Juyi, describing the sorrowful red peonies by the steps, appreciated only by 2 late cicadas, while holding a torch at night to gaze at the fading red before the morning winds blow it away. In his bones he indeed possesses the romance of a poet, but perhaps exactly as the mother-in-law stated, he lacks the actual talent of one. He can feel the beauty of things, but lacks the corresponding ability to express it. The next morning, Donghua wakes up early to pack his things and prepare to leave. Yesterday's unpleasantness hasn't affected the young couple's relationship. Sunhee coquettishly asks why he is leaving so early. Of course he cannot admit that he is running away, or that he is too embarrassed to face her family again. He is forced to show a wound on his arm, explaining that he accidentally fell while going up the mountain to see the moon last night and needs to visit a hospital. He tells her that he only feels this relaxed and at ease when he is with Sunhee. However, after enduring last night's interrogation, he has likely realized that if he wants to be with her, he has to give up something. On the way home, the vintage car breaks down again. Sitting in the car, Donghua ponders for a long time and for the first time, entertains the thought of changing his current situation. What Does That Nature Say to You is a 2025 film directed by Hong Sang-soo. The story of this movie is alarmingly simple. A 35-year-old poet drives a second-hand Kia and takes his girlfriend of 3 years to meet her family. Within a single day, they drink too much wine, tell too many truths and lies, and then everything returns to peace as if nothing ever happened. But what the director wants to convey is never just what happened, but what is contained within those silences. When people discuss money, they often pretend to discuss care, and when discussing care, they pretend to be discussing money. The cruelty of the director lies in letting everyone seemingly have their own valid reasons. The parents genuinely like Donghua and truly love their daughter, but they can't help worrying and using the sword of societal norms to label him. Donghua genuinely loves poetry and beauty, and truly loves his girlfriend, but he indeed lacks savings and life plans. The sister genuinely loves her younger sister and fears she will suffer, but her way of speaking makes people choke on their words. You see, everyone has their reasons. There is no right or wrong in how people understand lifestyles, yet everyone inadvertently hurts one another. This is the most embarrassing truth of life. We don't even need malice to bruise each other entirely. In the mountaintop cabin, the father-in-law tells his wife that Donghua is already 35 and his life is set in stone. This sentence is as cold as a sharp knife, but if you think carefully, how many people's set lives are merely the result of giving up the struggle at a certain moment? Donghua's predicament is exactly this. He cannot distinguish whether he is genuinely pursuing purity or using it as a shield to mask the sorrow of his own failure. But then again, is someone who climbs a mountain late at night just to look at a flower, a poet, or a deserter? Perhaps there has never been a clear boundary between the two. The film gives no answer and has no intention of providing one. What is left at the end is not praise or criticism of a particular lifestyle, but an unavoidable question. When you and the person you love stand before the same mountain and look at the same sunset, do you see the same world? That 1996 vintage car stalls out once again on the way back. Sitting silently by the road for a long time, Donghua finally says the words, "It's time to sell this car." It is not just a story about a car. The moment a person decides to give up something, it often means they are finally starting to face themselves. Change isn't necessarily a betrayal. Sometimes, it simply means a person is finally willing to open their eyes and see the somewhat complicated world clearly. Hong Sang-soo has made 33 films, and each one feels like a different version of the same question. Are we truly living authentically, or are we adopting a posture to conceal how we live? This time, he hands the question to a 35-year-old idealistic poet, to a table of middle-class people with refined lives, to the soft moonlight in the mountains outside Incheon, and to you, watching the film in front of the screen. Well, that's it for today's commentary. If you liked it, remember to follow, like, and comment. See you next time.